Yeah, hi, I guess you noticed that was Enough God. That was, Leslie actually wrote that. The other one, Oh Happy Day, we'll get to that. But I'm on the set with Wayne. Welcome, Wayne.
Thank you for having me here today.
Yes, my pleasure. So, why don't you give people a little feeling of like how your life all of a sudden exploded on you?
Well, my life did explode on me. I think that's a fair statement. Actually, it happened back in 1982. I was watching a TV show, the old Merv Griffin show from Hollywood, California. And he said, tonight we're going to have a very different show. I'm going to devote the entire hour to one man in his book. And that one man was Benjamin Creme. And he had with him, of all people, Gore Vidal.
Oh my gosh,
and
what a combination.
Exactly. When he said, tonight we're going to talk about Ben's book, it's called The Reappearance of the Christ and the Masters of Wisdom. And not knowing anything about this, I thought, to watch Gore Vidal, a sharp-tongued guy, he'll just shred this guy to pieces, and this will be comedy. But in fact, Gore Vidal was very interested in this piece of work, and that's where I learned about this world teacher called Maitreya, never thinking I would ever see him. But I thought the story was interesting when Ben said he's come since 1977. He calls him Maitreya the Christ reappeared. Not a Christian thing, but the love energy, the Christ consciousness energy. And that really began a new episode for me because...
I mean, were you like just blown away? I mean, there's something really...
Yes, in a sense it did, because I thought it was time that this world was in trouble, as Ben said. We'll destroy ourselves.
And you were in a position to see all the high-level stupid decisions.
Exactly. We were in the midst of a great Cold War. You must remember back then, things did not look good. And I wanted to investigate the story. That's all I wanted to do. But it ended up being a little more than that.
So what followed from that? So here in 1982, you watched the Merv Griffin show. At this time, you were still a high-level government official.
Yes, still
stationed in Washington, D.C.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. I ordered the book, and it took me some time to get it. And I had just finished reading the book, and I was in the parking lot of a grocery store, and two women were saying, Mr. Creme is coming to Washington, D.C.
Really?
And I thought, how bizarre, is this possible?
That is so weird.
And immediately, that following weekend, he did arrive, and I attended his lecture, and he stayed on to teach a little class of what he called transmission meditation. About 150 people showed up, and I thought, I've never meditated in my life. I'll give it a try. So I sat up in the front row, and it was at that point that Maitreya came in, sat next to me. I did not recognize him.
Did everybody else, or people who could see, like
him.
Benjamin Creme, could see him?
They saw him. Ben, of course, immediately knew it was Maitreya.
Right.
But I didn't.
Right.
I just thought he was another guy. And eventually, I realized he wanted to talk to me. And so I told him, I said, do you want to speak to me? And he pulled me up, and we went out of the room. And that's where he asked, he said, I need your help. And when people say, I need your help, it's usually, reach for your wallet, give me a buck, you know? Exactly, that's what I was thinking. Right. I was looking at this man that looked about 29, 30 years of age, in perfect health, beautiful grammar, and I'm thinking, what does he need $1 from me for? And finally I said, I don't understand. What kind of help are you talking about? And that's when he said, I have a lot of people to take care of in this world, and I need all the help from humanity that I can get. And then did what Ben Creme calls having an experience of Maitreya, which is simply, we just call it a heart-to-heart message. Doesn't go through the brain at all, just goes into your heart, and instantly you know everything you need to know about this man. And people who have had that experience have absolutely no doubt that he is the guy who's going to save the planet.
And you had that day at that
if you don't have it, you cannot understand the story fully.
Right.
But Maitreya promised he would do this for everyone on a day coming soon, I think, when he'll do it on international television and give everybody that telepathic message and this heart-to-heart thing so they will understand as well who he is.
Did he say which program?
Well,
he keeps talking about bridging heaven and earth, but we haven't had a slot open.
Well, there are people working on this, and from what I understand, that all the major networks have offered him time in this country, because I believe he'll speak on American television first, probably as Mr. Smith or something. But people will be genuinely interested in his message, and soon after that, they'll do a satellite link up and allow him to speak.
Well, now,
to the world.
CNN and all the stations are all over the world.
Well, he's already been on CNN back in 1988. And many people say, I never heard this story. And I said, well, back in 88, CNN had him on almost every hour, on the hour, photographs of him, and it ran for a week with the title, Could This Be the Christ Reappeared? Because he appeared before 6,000 people in Nairobi, Kenya, at a prayer session outside. They didn't even know he was coming. He never said who he was, but he materialized out of thin air on the platform, took the microphone, spoke to them in fluent Swahili. People went down on their knees and said, it's got to be the Christ. And then he vanished into thin air as he came. But there was a journalist who took photos with his cameraman and wrote up a story. And that story hit the front pages of the Times in London, and it was in this country, and CNN carried it. But I think people just dismiss it as,
well, it's got to have a follow-up.
Exactly.
Those things are,
People said, well, this is interesting, and then they just sort of forgot about it because nothing in their world seemed to change.
So why, I mean, there obviously is a lot of trouble going on here. So why isn't Maitreya coming forth? Because at different times we've had different people on, and they were saying before the millennium now, whether the millennium was 2000 or 2001 or whatever. But
well, first of all, I think it's a frightening thought for many people. We talk about a world teacher coming in. A lot of people don't like that idea. Even if they think it is a great spiritual being, they don't like the idea of somebody coming and telling them what to do. But of course, that's not what Maitreya intends to do at all. And the reason he is so slow, and we call it an emergence, because it is a very slow process, so he doesn't shock humanity too much, but is changing the world behind the scenes. He came in 1977 in the midst of the Cold War, and look what's happened. Within a very short time, in 1993, Time magazine said, it's been an age of miracles. The Soviet Union melts away, the Berlin Wall comes down, Germany's reunited, apartheid ends in South Africa, and the Israelis and the Palestinians began to talk about giving them a homeland. These were enormous changes. Well, but the world was in a very difficult position back then.
And do you think it's not now?
It is still dysfunctional. We live in a dysfunctional world. But at least we've taken a step back where the Russians, the Americans, the Chinese in these
They're all fighting somebody else now.
We finally agreed to cooperate on some level.
There is that to be said.
Yes. But I think that Maitreya knows when the time is right to come out, and I think he realizes now that it is time to come forward, and precisely for what you're saying, that events are blowing up again in the world in places where we never expect them to get totally out of hand. And I think this will make him say, the time is right now. He's been waiting for humanity to sort of invite him to come out, because he cannot just appear and override all the free will of humanity. He doesn't want to do that. But at the same time, if the world's in crisis, he's got to begin to show himself, and he doesn't come alone, of course. He comes with a host of others. So this is something we simply have to wait and